Welcome to the 10th, everybody. 10th of July, 2025. We're going to get into your Santa Clarita real estate update. I did a very long video yesterday pertaining to loans and lending for real estate buyers out there. What's the best way to approach that? And a lot of good feedback has come in so far. One of the things people wanted me to expand on further were the type of pre-qualification letters. Now, let me just give you this. I'm not a real estate lender. I don't loan money if people come to me for a mortgage. I have a handful of lenders that are locally based that are just fantastic. Some mainline banks, some credit union contacts, and some mortgage brokers. In the show yesterday, I talked a lot about mortgage brokers and how there's a lot of advantage, but sometimes in special circumstances, you can get a better deal at other places. Better deal meaning less in costs. Now, that's a very slippery slope because, in fact, when they talk about less in costs, sometimes the interest rate does get modified or go up. Maybe some of the terms change. It's going to depend. So really looking at the seller's sheet, showing you that good faith estimate, showing you what they're charging you is important. But again, that also can change depending on the property. And in fact, in a lot of cases, a lender is going to be reluctant to produce those just for the simple fact you don't have a property identified. You don't have a specific home with your eye on, and each residence is going to carry different fees with it potentially. And if you're in the same neighborhood, the same basic house, same price, same everything else, then everything's going to be the same. But if you have one neighborhood, you have one residence here, but then you're moving over to an adjacent neighborhood, you might find that things are going to be quite different. In fact, for Mello-Roos taxes, if those happen to exist on a property, which is an extra assessment of sorts, basically it's what the builder used to pay 100% of the time to be able to build new housing. Then back in the Stevenson Ranch days, I guess that was probably the late 80s, early 90s, a couple senators named Mello and Roos came up with a concept, and I believe they were able to get that sold to the public, where the real estate builders were able to pass this along to the residents there by piecing it out and splitting it up depending on how many houses were built. So the math was done. Let's say they were building 200 houses, and to have that kind of a support system with fire departments, schools, and infrastructure, street lighting, and all of these sorts of things, then they came up with a number. They divided that by 200, and then they came up with a particular tax that they could charge each of the individual home buyers in there over time, and then that would then pay for those different resources in those local areas. That's Mello-Roos. That's where they came from. Now, besides that, if you look at the other types of fees that you might encounter, again, one street to another street might be totally different. One might have an HOA based at $55, if that even exists anymore. The next door neighboring property that's in a completely different tract by maybe a different builder might carry a different homeowners association amount. Maybe it's $200 or $300. It can be that different. If you look at the neighborhoods and you try to make a determination as to why it would be more expensive, what extra are they giving you, you might not actually be able to really notice anything. So the questions that come in with the HOA, definitely you're going to want to pick up the phone and make a call. Call the property management company. You should be able to get that information from your agent. To leave it up to your agent's okay, but the problem is they have a vested interest in selling you the property, you wanting to buy it. So maybe they call and they get that person on their last day that hates working at a property management company or with the HOA. Maybe they're exiting stage left. This is left. Maybe they're exiting stage left and they want to leave a mark on the business. So when somebody calls and wants something, information about the neighborhood, they're going to spin you this yarn full of lies. And then that's a problem. And your agent brings that back to you, then you close escrow, and then who are you going to sue first? Well, of course you're going to sue your agent. So the best thing to do is to call them up, and that just to kind of clear up the waters from this individual that's going to try to lie to you. Then you follow it up with an email. Hey, listen, Carl, thank you so much. I appreciate your talking to me today. I did ask you about having 3 dogs that I have coming into the area. You said it's not a problem, even if they're the most vicious pit bulls on the planet. No offense against pit bulls. Okay, there's great pit bulls out there. But anyway, that's a breed that kind of carries a certain reputation. And in some areas, they will actually exclude actual types of animals, the number, the make. It's like a car, right? The make, the actual breed of the animal. They might actually stop that. You want to find that out before you move into an area. So you want to do your due diligence and call. The other thing that they wanted me to talk about is regarding taxes. It could be that a house carries, if you're looking at a tax rate currently of a house that you're thinking about buying, it could be that house hasn't been reassessed for a while. Maybe the value, maybe it's sold for $1,000,000. So if you're living in Los Angeles County and there's no Mello-Roos on it, typically that's going to be between 1.18% or 1.5% to 1.25%. So let's take the 1.25% figure. $1,000,000 property, you buy that, it has a brand new assessed value of $1,000,000. That's what you pay for it. Now the property is worth $1,000,000 as far as the assessor goes. So now you're starting paying $1,000,000 property taxes on $1,000,000 assessed property. And if it's 1.25%, that's $12,500 a year. Whew. So there's all that. If you're looking in an area, though, and let's say your agent's sending you the tax records or you're doing your due diligence because you're like a real estate detective, because when people start buying and selling houses, people do a lot of research that normally they wouldn't do, especially because there's just so much nonsense out there regarding the information that you're going to glean in the online channels. But let's say they go and they're looking and they see a tax base of a lot less. Don't assume that's where it is. If you happen to be in LA County, the typical standard is about 1.25% for the assessed value. If you're seeing something a lot lower than that, it could be that that property hasn't had a reassessment in a while. Usually when the economy gets bad and there's all sorts of fiscal issues within a particular local money source or these different economies, usually they're pretty good about reassessing properties, especially if properties have increased in price hand over fist. And a lot of people try to fight that because there are different ways. If the property's values start to dip, usually you don't see the county coming out and say, oh my gosh, you've lost half the value in your property. Let's reassess you less so you don't pay as much. Usually that end of it doesn't happen when it starts to go down. That's up to the homeowner, and that would be something you would reach out to your agent about to have them put together a reassessment package for you so you could take that information and data to the tax assessor's office for the county, and they'll be able to look at everything and work it out. So that's with regard to looking at properties, doing your proper investigations, making sure what you're seeing is something that you're going to be prepared to purchase. When I did talk about loans and lending, I didn't talk about something that I normally do with regard to comfort. If you qualify for, let's say, $1,000,000 house, maybe you look at that all-in payment. Maybe it has some Mello-Roos tax. Maybe it does have an HOA. Maybe these are things that you weren't willing to accept at the beginning, but now you've gone out and you've looked and you walk through properties and you just really haven't found anything that fits. So you say, well, maybe a little Mello-Roos tax for a while isn't going to be too bad. That little while could be 30, 40 years. And then at the end of it, it could be that it gets extended for whatever reason. Whatever reason, I'm sure when that comes, you will be given proof and the cause as to why they're going to extend it. But just know at that end date, whatever somebody is telling you, some entity saying this is the day it's going to end, 2036, make sure that you do that investigation, make sure that's in fact true, or it's not going to be extended. So you accept these additional costs. Maybe now with those other costs, maybe that mortgage, that monthly all-in payment is going to be uncomfortable for you. Be true to yourself. Don't overextend yourself. The joke is don't overextend yourself at least the first time. You'll have the rest of your life to be mortgage poor. That's what they call it. Make sure that you're getting somewhere comfortable and safe, somewhere that you can grow into with you or yourself or you and a family or some people that you have strapped on with you. But just make sure that you're not going to be violating yourself, because it sucks to be worrying every single month about how much you're going to pay and where your money's going to come from to make that mortgage payment. Having said that, when you factor in some of these other costs, sometimes it becomes uncomfortably high for a real estate buyer. So make sure you do due diligence. Talk to your family. Say, listen, this is where we are currently with income coming in a month. This is what the mortgage is going to be. You couple that with either having to pay your property taxes twice a year or having it impounded as part of your payment. That's going to be up to the loan and lending company whether or not they're going to allow it to be included in every monthly payment or whether it's going to be something you pay twice a year. If it is going to be outside your normal payment, definitely, and it's a lot of money, well, any money is a lot of money, you're going to want to make sure that you save that so you have it to apply. Every month, you should extract out a certain amount of money to be able to take care of your property taxes. Properties aren't sold really quickly when taxes aren't paid. But the issue is your lender's going to set up some kind of an account and then start paying it themselves if you fall back and don't adhere to that responsibility. Typically, same thing with home insurance. If you're not paying your home insurance, just like a car, right? You're not paying it. The person that loaned you the money to buy the car or the residence, they're going to do some enforcement action and basically give you insurance they have access to. And believe you me, it's not going to be as low and cheap as you might be able to find on your own. They're going to charge you a premium for it because they have companies that, of course, they love on and love on them. Watch out for yourselves out there. We're going to give you that real estate update as I talked about, teasing you at the very beginning. So right now, the last 7 days in Santa Clarita Valley, we have 11 properties coming soon. 64 properties are brand new on the market for sale. 77 properties have had their prices changed. I saw a comment yesterday on a stream out there talking about what's happening in the real estate market as far as properties falling out of escrow, coming back on the market. I'm not seeing the numbers that they were talking about. They had a huge amount of numbers. Maybe they're doing this for 90 days, but in the last 7 days, as far as properties that were in escrow and then pop back out of escrow active on the market, that's a 26. That's 26. And that's been 11 or 10 the last several weeks. It hasn't been a shocking number. You track back into March, April, yeah, those numbers were quite a bit higher. Properties that have gone into escrow, we have 29. 38 properties have gone into pending status. That means these are properties that have entered really deep into escrow. And an agent will typically do that when they have an offer on that property that has made it all the way past. So it's been approved. Everybody's agreed. It's made it past the contingency removal date. That's when the buyer is approached via their agent. And usually the cause of that is the listing agent, the agent representing the seller, is taking an enforcement action. They're saying, listen, we need you to remove all of your contingencies. So if you cancel after this point, then your deposit becomes the seller's property. That's where those contingency removals come in. And they're going to be established up front. You're going to know what they are. At least your agent should talk to you about all this. They're going to give you those numbers up at the beginning. You have X amount of days to do your inspections. You have X amount of days to secure insurance. You have X amount of days to be able to get your loan locked in and completely approved. Once these parts of the real estate process, and realistically, a real estate contract, besides establishing price, is all about time frames. There's a certain amount of times to do things. There's a certain amount of times for you to read the seller's disclosures, to see what the seller says about the property, and to review them and maybe go outside the scope of the document and look at other things that might impact the property. Maybe you'll be, keyed off into something. Well, maybe I should check on that now that they say that there's a lot of airline traffic or airline noise that happens to go over the neighborhood. Maybe I should go sit there because it could be on the path to LAX. Maybe I should go sit there and see what that's like. So those disclosures are important, but those are the time frames. Once you get past all those dates, once all those dates have come and gone, then usually that contingency removal is going to be issued to you as a real estate buyer, not by your agent. Most buyers' agents are going to try to push that as far as possible into the future, only just because they want to make sure everything's really done. And some of those contingency removal guidelines, they depend on other entities in the process. If it's a real estate agent, yes, we've done the inspections. Yes, we've done a request for repair. Yes, we've got through that. Yes, the buyer knows the condition of the property 100%. That next step is going to be the lender. Is the loan done? Is it going to actually go through 100% of the time? And in some cases, depending on the lender, it's like pulling teeth or fighting cats, trying to get them to give you some kind of written authorization that the buyer can remove their lending or loan contingency. Because if something happens on the lending end after that, the buyer's deposit, after they've removed contingencies, the buyer deposit comes the property of the seller. And at 3% of a particular sales price or offering price, that's a lot of money. Be $30,000 for $1 million house, right? So you got some money there. If in fact the buyer fails to finish. And if it comes down to the lender, the agent should be following up with the lender saying, hey, listen, Jack, give me the buyer's, whether or not this is going to close. We have a removal, contingency removal for the loan. I need you to let me know that we're good removing that. And then you should CC the buyer on it as the agent. So the buyer knows that you're doing your due diligence. And if there is any holdup, then it's the lender's issue. And if there is a holdup, as a listing agent, I would always want to say, well, what's holding you up? What's the deal? I would communicate with the agent representing the buyer. I would communicate with the lender representing the buyer. What's going on? Oh, it's a pre-funding or some kind of a condition that's been instituted by one of the powers that be on the loan side. And there is a lot of that happens. So don't think it's just because your lender's taking extra long martini lunches. It could be that they're in fact really waiting for something to happen, some kind of a decision or some kind of word to be given. Also, on that, it could be a request from the buyer. Maybe that particular buyer has been requested to get another verification of employment. Maybe they need a new date on something. Maybe they need some bank statement. Maybe there was some deposit that they really don't understand. They want to get some letter of clarification on it. These things pop up because there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen reviewing all this stuff. When that does happen, though, and finally the buyer has everything that they need, and finally the listing agent is able to get solid enforcement of all the contingencies removals, after that, then the buyer pretty much is all in. It's very rare we would see a property go back on market, but that's that pending status. Usually that's what's used on the internet. So when you see properties that are active under contract, they're kind of at the beginning. They haven't gotten all the way through the process as laid out in contract by those particular guidelines. Once they do, though, then you're good to go. And usually the agent will change the status from being active under contract into pending if they ever do. It could be that they leave it active under contract because maybe they're trying to get more leads off of it online. Maybe some of the syndication sites pay it more attention whenever they're looking at properties for sale, because a lot of times the pending properties, when that status is used, those properties take the back seat to all the other properties that are being advertised for sale. And of course, the ones that show up first are going to be the ones within the first 7 days as of being listed. And then after that point, they're going to be the properties that have been on the market, of course, longer. Then you're going to have your active under back properties that are active status, but backup offers being accepted, meaning there was an offer that was accepted. The buyer and seller both agree, but they're at the very beginning of the process. So the seller, just to do their due diligence to themselves, want to make sure that if somebody else might want to write an offer on that property, they'll have an open door to do so they can still go look at the property, still write an offer. And if they do write an offer, the seller's not going to be able to kick that particular buyer out they have, but they will be able to hold it in backup position. And usually, as a good agent, one that's very tops in communication, they should reach out to that other agent just to let you know another buyer did come into the property. They liked it enough that they wrote us a solid backup offer. So that you might want to convey that to your buyer that now we have another offer that the seller really is interested in. Not bad, because it goes and it shows that buyer, hey, listen, you're not the only game in town. And if the buyer might get cold feet, then they'll at least have some kind of thing to think about prior to actually canceling. But again, and in the end point here of today's show, if a buyer wants to cancel, they're going to cancel. They're not going to continue. There's nothing you can do as an agent, a listing agent, a buyer's agent. So you let them cancel. Ask them why. Talk them through it. But if they want to get out because they don't feel it's right, or they have an issue, or whatever it may be, especially if it's something regarding health and safety, something regarding an item that they were unable to get resolved, then you let them cancel. That's it. And if it's past the removal of contingencies date, I would make sure that all your ducks are aligned on the buyer side, seller side, and everybody, because something traumatic is going to happen. And that buyer's deposit, potentially, and that's a lot of money, could now become the property of the seller. If the buyer's going to cancel, it should always be done before that. But again, also for good reason. Buyers jumping ship, going from one property to another because they have cold feet, or because maybe they find a better deal for sale as they're, still getting these real estate listings sent to them by the syndication sites while they're in escrow, which that's some of the problem with these sites. Not that the buyer shouldn't have many options, but once they go into a property, a decision is going to have to be made sooner or later. And if they keep seeing properties coming onto the market and they keep jumping from one to another, now they've caused a lot of pain for sellers out there. Not that everybody shouldn't be able to get what they want in the end, but ethically, maybe you're not ready to buy real estate. Maybe you shouldn't go into it until you're completely ready. Because what happens is each of these sellers now reflect a back on market status, and then future buyers could look at that as maybe there being an issue with the property. And I'm here to tell you that in most cases, it is not an issue with the property that was discovered by the buyer or something that the seller was unwilling to attend to. A lot of times it is this buyer cold feet because the buyer went in and they just changed their mind without due cause. Well, they had their own cause. So the buyer changed their mind and then the property goes back on the market. A lot of times that could have been avoided if the buyer's agent had a discussion with their buyer and talked to them about real estate. Maybe they shouldn't be buying at all. Some people fit that category. I'm Connor with Honor. I appreciate you watching. When you're ready, reach out to me. We do have my system is put together at SantaClaritaOpenHouses.com. I have everything updated there. I have a blog. I post this video. I post brand new videos every day. So please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or of course, advice for me. I love to hear from you folks out there. If you want to hear a show on a particular topic, fire that off. If you're watching this on Facebook or LinkedIn, or you're watching this on YouTube, please, I would love a like. And if you want to subscribe to my banter, I would appreciate that as well. And let me know if I can help. I'm Connor with Honor. We will see you in the next one. Take care.